400 Men is my title, and I thought it's kind of a little bit vague, so I put, which I don't usually do, I put a subtitle there. And the subtitle is What to Do When Your Deep Fear Gets Exposed. Just to freak you out as a title. There's a story of a father who was passing by his son's bedroom and he noticed it was very clean. And he looked in and the bed was made and the room was immaculate. And he thought, this is so strange. And then he noticed there was an envelope on the pillow prominently displayed. And so he went over and with trembling hands, he opened the letter and he read this. Dear Dad, it's with great regret and sorrow that I'm writing you. I had to elope with my new girlfriend because I wanted to avoid a scene with you and Mom. I've been finding real passion with Stacy. She's so nice, but I knew you wouldn't approve of her because of all her piercings, tattoos, and her tight motorcycle clothes. And also because she's so much older than I am. But it's not only the passion, Dad, she's pregnant. Stacy said we will be very happy. She has a trailer in the woods and a stack of firewood for the whole winter. We share a dream of having many more children. Stacy's opened my eyes to the fact that marijuana doesn't really hurt anyone. We'll be growing it ourselves and trading it with the other people in the commune for all the cocaine and ecstasy we can handle. Don't worry, Dad, I'm 15. I know how to take care of myself. Someday we'll come back and visit you so you get to know your grandkids. Love, your son, Joshua. And then the P.S. Dad, none of the above is true. I'm over at Jason's house. I just wanted to remind you there's worse things in life than the school report on the table. And then he finishes, call me when it's safe for me to come home. Call me when it's safe to come home. That's what Jacob could have said to his mom. Call me when it's safe to come home. And then he leaves, and then she never calls. She doesn't call for 20 years. Jacob gets married twice. He has some kids. He starts a career. He makes some money. He settles down. And then finally, God gives him the thumbs up and sends him home. It's time to go home. What was Jacob afraid of in the first place? It's been so long since we started this series, maybe you forgot. Jacob started off his life pretty rocky. He had a prophecy, and then he was heel-grabbing his brother as he came out of the womb, his hairy older brother, Esau, who's stronger than him. And then Jacob schemes to get the family inheritance for a bowl of stew. And Esau is annoyed. But when Jacob dresses up as his brother and steals the family blessing, the coveted blessing from his blind father, Esau is enraged. And he threatens murder. Fear is really, if we were looking for a definition, it's our anticipation that something bad will happen, isn't it? And for Jacob, maybe it's death or suffering or pain or misfortune. Maybe it's discomfort. Maybe it's financial or physical or emotional. We experience this. The truth is we all have fears. We do. Even the bravest of us, even those among us who seem impervious to the well-worn daily anxieties and fears. We all are afraid of something. Last week, we heard about Jacob's fear of his father-in-law, Laban, and to be fair, he was chasing him down with unclear intent, right? And then we also heard about Rachel's fear that prevented her from leaving the gods of her youth. And even so, God comes through dramatically. And now Jacob is on his way home. But the big question remains, is Esau still mad? Let's find out. Oh my goodness. Genesis chapter 32, verses 1 to 21. You can follow in your Bible or on the screen. Jacob also went on his way, and the angels of God met him. When Jacob saw them, he said, "This is the camp of God." So he named that place Mahanaim. Mahanaim. You got to practice that one. Jacob sent messengers ahead of him to his brother Esau in the land of Seir, the country of Edom. He instructed them, "This is what you are to say to my lord Esau. Your servant Jacob says, I have been staying with Laban and have remained there till now. I have cattle and donkeys, sheep and goats, male and female servants. Now I'm sending this message to my lord that I may find favor in your eyes." When the messengers returned to Jacob, they said, "We went to your brother Esau, And now he is coming to meet you, and 400 men are with him. In great fear and distress, Jacob divided the people who were with him into two groups, and the flocks and herds and camels as well. He thought, if Esau comes and attacks one group, the group that's left may escape. Then Jacob prayed, O God of my father Abraham, God of my father Isaac, Yahweh, you who said to me, go back to your country and your relatives, and I will make you prosper. I am unworthy of all the kindness and faithfulness you have shown your servant. I had only my staff when I crossed this Jordan, but now I've become two camps. Save me, I pray, from the hand of my brother Esau, for I am afraid he will come and attack me, and also the mothers with their children. But you have said, I will surely make you prosper and will make your descendants like the sand of the sea, which cannot be counted. He spent the night there, and from what he had with him, he selected a gift for his brother Esau, 200 female goats and 20 male goats, 200 ewes and 20 rams, 30 female camels with their young, 40 cows and 10 bulls and 20 female donkeys and 10 male donkeys. He put them in the care of his servants, each herd by itself, and he said to his servants, go ahead of me and keep some space between the herds. He instructed the one in the lead. When my brother Esau meets you and asks, who do you belong to and where are you going and who owns all these animals in front of you, then you are to say, they belong to your servant Jacob. They are a gift sent to my lord Esau, and he is coming behind us. He also instructed the second, the third, and all the others who followed the herds. You're to say the same thing to Esau when you meet him. And be sure to say, your servant Jacob is coming behind us. For he thought, I will pacify him with these gifts I'm sending on ahead. Later, when I see him, perhaps he will receive me. So Jacob's gifts went on ahead of him, but he himself spent the night in the camp. Oh, this is God's word. That's kind of part one of two. There's another really exciting part coming next week. My big idea this morning is when your deep fears surface, it's time for deep transformation. When your deep fears surface, it's time for deep transformation. There's a lot of numbers in this story and a lot of repeated words, and so I'm going to kind of key on those. The first number is the number 2, and there's 2 camps, or I have a subheading because I thought we'd be into that today, and the subheading is God is near. This story actually reminded me of another story. I had to look, I couldn't remember who it happened to, and it was Joshua, and it was in Joshua chapter 5, and so I looked it up, and this is the story. Joshua is near Jericho. He's brought the people of Israel. Moses brought them, and then Joshua, and they're going in, and they're going to have to fight all these battles, and it's really scary. And Joshua goes to Jericho, and Jericho was the big, scary city. That was where the spies went to, and they were like, we'll never take this country. These walls are so big, you could ride a chariot around on top. This is impossible. And Joshua's going to check it out. He's supposed to come up with a plan. What are they going to do? How are they going to take down Jericho? And he goes out to see Jericho, and then this is what happens. Joshua chapter 5, verse 13 and 14. When Joshua was near Jericho, he looked up and saw a man standing in front of him with a drawn sword in his hand. Joshua went up to him and asked, are you for us or for our enemies? Neither, he replied, but as the commander of the army of Yahweh, I have now come. What a weird story, right? I'm like, neither? Neither? What? This is God's people, God's chosen people. What do you mean neither? This is the time. We need some backup. We need some angels. Esau is coming with 400 men. Our story is dependent on the context that Jacob is following the leading of God. You should know that. Last week we heard how Yahweh spoke to him in a dream, another dream, and told him to go home. And in Genesis 31, God says, now leave this land at once and go back to your native land. Jacob is obeying God's leading. And then Jacob protects Laban, or God protects Jacob from Laban. And now there's angels again. Like the second time Jacob encounters angels, before it was on the stairway in the dream. And this time he meets them. And to me, I was like, yes, finally he meets angels. This is so good. but it's not as good as I think. It says, Jacob went on his way, and the angels of God met him. When Jacob saw them, he said, this is the camp of God. And so he named that place Mahanaim. But the actual wording in Hebrew it implies a threatening encounter, actually. I think of it as like, oh, he met them, that's so great. Like, this is not angels dabbing his brow and bringing him food and speaking encouraging words to him. Mahanaim, it means two camps, or great army, or God's army. It's as if Jacob sees an angelic army camped close by. And then he names this place. They're not walking a staircase, they're encamped. And I think this should challenge our idea of God being on our side, as it means he's going to just do whatever I want. Like, God with you should also be sobering, because he's come to expose your deep fear, and he's come to have your whole heart. He won't settle for less than all of you, and a refinery is hot. Somehow it seems important to me that Jacob would see the army of God encamped nearby as he's about to enter into his deepest fear and a vulnerable place. Mahanaim, two camps, two brothers, two groups, two meetings, two names. Mahanaim. And the number 400. 400 men, or my subtitle, Your Deep Fear. This also reminded me of a story. It's a story in Genesis 14. And this is a story before ours takes place. So it's Jacob's grandfather, Abraham. And I told you about him before, how he and Lot, his nephew, went to the promised land. And remember how Abraham let Lot pick, and Lot chose the green valley, the lush green valley, and he goes into the Jordan Valley, and he camps near Sodom. Remember I said that? And then the rest of the story that in Genesis 14 is that Lot moves into Sodom and he makes his home there. And you should know that in those times there's like a king of a city, so he's more like a warlord maybe. So there's a king of Sodom, there's a king of Gomorrah, there's a king of a bunch of cities. And one day the king of Sodom decides he's going to overthrow his ruler, his tyrant. And so he gathers a bunch of these kings together, and he says, okay guys, king of Sodom, you join me. And so they get 5 kings together and like, we're going to fight him. And we get our armies together. And then the overlord tyrant decided he wasn't going to stand for this. So he gathered 3 of his friends too. And so there were 3 other kings. So there's 4 kings against 5 kings. And they all get to have a battle in the middle. And the valley, and it's crazy. And there's tar pits. And like, it's a wild fight. And in the end, the tyrant overlord king and his friends win. And the king of Sodom runs away with his friends and his army. And what do they do when they win? They go take the plunder, right? So the nearest cities that are now undefended is Sodom and Gomorrah. And so they go with his friends and they take all the plunder. And included in the plunder is Lot and his family. And so they ride off, they got all this stuff and they ride away. Now Abraham, he's camped way over by the trees of Mamre, that's a guy, and his brothers. And Abraham hears his nephew Lot has been taken. And so he gathers his 318 trained men together, and they decide they're going to go after Lot to try to rescue him. So they mount up on camels or horses and they go after them. And in the night, they catch up to these 4. They're moving slow because of all the plunder. And they catch up to them and they split up into 2 groups. And then they attack in the night. And then the guys run away. And Abraham, he wins the spoils and he carries them back and they hold a parade. Abraham, you're the best. And Abraham wins the day. Now, it's not like Abraham is a great warrior. He happened to win that one. And his 318 men. This is, I think, a good example of what you could do with 318 trained men. You could take down 4 kings and their armies. Esau's coming with 400. Like, we all have fears. Glamour magazine YouTube channel in 2020 did a survey. They were trying to find out what men are the most afraid of. And I was thinking, Jacob, he's man. What is he afraid of? This was the survey. They surveyed 70 men aged 5 to 75. So it's a broad age range. And this is what they found. This is their number 8 top fear was the end of the world due to climate change. Number 7 is clowns. That's maybe the bottom range of the age. Maybe you'll recognize some of your fears, guys. I don't know. Number 6 was heights. Number 5, evil people causing me harm. Number 4, being alone or dying alone. Number 3, spiders and snakes. I'm glad that made the list. It's important. Number 2, death of a loved one. And the number 1 most often mentioned fear of men is failing to live up to their potential. Like, what are the fears deep down, under the spiders and snakes, below heights? What's down in there? What if my business fails? What if my spouse leaves? What if my parents find out? What if someone I love dies? What if I suffer greatly? What if I don't measure up? And Jacob's fear is his big brother, but I think that's the secondary fear. There's fears below that one for him. And I think his deep down fear is, what if I can't trust this Yahweh? What if he lets me down? What if he brought me here to die? What if he really isn't faithful? Isn't this very much like our deep human fear, the one we've had from the very beginning? What if God cannot be trusted? It's the fear from the garden, isn't it? What if we can't trust him? The serpent whispers our deep fear. Esau's coming with 400 men. Last week we heard Jacob make this oath to the fear of Isaac. He was afraid, and then God came and graciously met him and protected him. And now Jacob is following God. And even in this, he takes the high road of reconciliation. He says, send the message, your servant Jacob, and send it to my lord Esau. That's not the prophecy. The prophecy is Jacob is going to be the master and Esau is going to be the servant. But Jacob's message is the opposite. Just go low with this, guys. Just make sure you say it really nice. And then the messengers bring back this very disturbing news. We went to your brother Esau, and now he's coming to meet you, and 400 men are with him. Esau is coming with 400 men. Why 400? What? 10 mounted men would be a great welcome party. Hey, Esau, wow, great. 20 mounted men would be in a great escort. Yeah, take us through this dangerous land, Esau, with your mounted guys. Yeah, that's awesome. Be the escort. 50 mounted men, I think, would be like a raiding party. If you saw 50 mounted men, they're going after a village or a town. Watch out. That's dangerous. 400? 400's an army. It actually is. It's the number for a militia. That's the number. And it is a small army. And that's his response in verse 7. In great fear and distress, Jacob divided the people who were with him. And I think, Jacob, you should be afraid. You should. Do you feel the pit in your stomach? Esau hasn't been living high on the hog. He's not bald and fat at the reunion. He made his camp in the middle of his enemies, and he's dispossessed the Horites, and he won the land of Seir. He's made the country of Edom because he fought. If he was a hunter back in the day, he's a warrior now. And he's coming with 400 men. I'd like to invite you to one honest moment of reflection. If you've lived long enough, you've had this experience where the ground opens up in front of you and a chasm threatens to swallow you whole. Your stomach drops as you realize your worst fears have come to pass. Maybe it's a phone call, or the doctor's words, or an email, or that look, or that meeting. the message that the worst has come to pass and nothing will ever be the same again. I was thinking about, for me, what are my worst fears? I made a little list for you. I'm afraid Lauren will die and I'll be left alone. Or my kids. I'm afraid you'll find out I'm an imposter. I'm not as good at this job as you might think I am. I'm not as spiritual or as knowledgeable as I should be. My deepest fear is that when I stand before Jesus, I will be found wanting. That I will settle for mediocrity and comfort. That I will give up. That I will let him down. What is your deep fear? One prayer, and then that massively large number, 550 gifts. Most of us, if we're in trouble, we turn to prayer. And even people who don't believe in God, when they're in trouble, turn to prayer. They do. They recognize somehow this moment, the fear and the difficulty, it does this in us. There's a story of a guy, an atheist, who goes up for a hike and he's walking along and the ground gives way and he starts falling down a cliff and he's sure to die, and he grabs hold of a branch and he's hanging there by the branch above certain death, and then the branch starts to break, and then he finally just, okay, God, if you're up there, will you save me? And if you'll save me, I'll give you my whole life. And then he hears a voice. This is God. You can trust me. Let go of the branch and I will catch you. And then he says, is there anyone else up there I can talk to? This is what happens to Jacob. Jacob's in his moment of distress and he prays. It's his first recorded prayer, actually, and the only extended prayer in the book of Genesis. Sometimes you come to the end of yourself. You come to the end of your ability and you recognize or admit that you cannot save yourself. You can't fix this big problem. This happens in the Bible all the time. There's all sorts of stories where this happens. This happens to Jonah, the famous prophet, who's, he was called to go somewhere and he went the opposite way. He got on a ship going as far as he can away, and there's a storm, and in the storm the sailors on the boat say, the storm is too crazy. Someone caused this storm. And they draw names, and the name is Jonah, and they say, Jonah, what do we do? And he says, throw me overboard. So they throw him into the sea, and the sea goes calm. And then a fish swallows him. He's literally in the most trapped place you could be, the stomach of a fish. And then he's in the lowest place you could possibly. He's down in the ocean, in the belly of a fish. And that's where he finally comes to the place of surrender and says, fine, you can have all of me. I will obey if you give me another chance. King Hezekiah, he'd been through an epic story, and then he got sick and he's lying on his bed, and Isaiah the prophet comes into him and says, hey, you're going to die. God says you need to get your affairs in order. Your time's up. And then Isaiah leaves, and Hezekiah is lying on his bed, and he turns over and he prays this desperate prayer to God. God, I've followed you. I've given you my whole life. Would you give me more time? And then Isaiah, before he'd even left the building, comes back and he says, God heard your prayer, and he's going to give you more time. Or these people who come to Jesus in desperation, the woman who's bleeding and she overcomes her fear and her shame. She's not supposed to be in the crowd, but she goes in there because she's desperate. If I could just touch him, I might be healed. Or blind Bartimaeus, this guy, he's like yelling at the top of his lungs. Jesus is passing by. He can't get to Jesus. He's blind. So he starts yelling, Son of David, have mercy on me. And they're like, shut up. Son of David, have mercy. And he's just yelling, like desperate for Jesus. And Jesus comes over and heals him. I think of Jairus and the centurion and the doubting father and Zacchaeus, all these people who come to Jesus out of desperation. Our deep fear often is being exposed to enable deep transformation. Like things get exposed in us so that we can experience deep transformation. When we're afraid, that's when we're meant to turn to him That's when the walls come down, the masks fall away, the image you've been propping up that everyone will think everything is great. You're pretending in your pride and your shame. And you come and you say, this is what I'm really afraid of, God. That's what happens with Jacob. And Jacob's prayer follows a beautiful sequence. Actually, if you're not sure how to pray, you're like, prayer, it just seems so weird and I don't know what to say. You could follow Jacob's pattern. It's beautiful. Invocation, confession, and then petition. That's kind of the breakdown of his prayer. He starts in verse 9 to 12. Jacob prayed, O God of my father Abraham, God of my father Isaac, Yahweh, you who said to me, go back to your country and your relatives, and I will make you prosper. Like Jesus has this same thing when he says, our Father in heaven. That's how you start your prayer. Hallowed be your name. We look to him. We look to his character. We worship him for who he is. We speak his name. We bring his word to mind. And then this confession in verse 10, I'm unworthy of all the kindness and faithfulness you've shown your servant. I had only my staff when I crossed this Jordan, and now I've become two camps. It's like the confession that I come admitting I'm a mess. I can't do this on my own. I'm a mixture of fear and doubt. I'm unworthy of grace. Or like Paul, we might say, I've done what I ought not to have done, and I don't do what I ought to do. What a mess. We come in confession. And then the third part is the petition, which is kind of in three parts a little bit. Verse 11 and 12. Save me, I pray. That's his prayer. Save me from the hand of my brother Esau. For I am afraid, he admits again. He will come and attack me, and also the mothers with their children. But you have said, I will surely make you prosper and make your descendants like the sand of the sea, which cannot be counted. Like, deliver me. That's his prayer. Save me, God. And then admits his fear again. This is what I'm afraid of. But you said this. He goes back to the promise of God. I am afraid. But you said you will make good on your promise. You finish what you start. You rescue and redeem. You heal. You restore. You make clean. Your perfect love drives out fear. That's my confidence. And then he breaks into his plan. Jacob's plan is to divide into two groups. Or two camps is actually the word, funny enough. And it's like the escape hatch. If one gets attacked, the other one will get away. And then he prays this prayer, beautiful prayer, Lord, would you save me? And then the third part of his plan is that he's going to overwhelm Esau with gifts, just piles of gifts and piles of gifts. And then this is what he says in verse 15. For he thought, I will pacify him with these gifts I'm sending on ahead. Later when I see him, perhaps he will receive me. And what's interesting about this is we could read it and think, oh, this is just what Jacob thought. In Hebrew, there's some very interesting repetitions here. So the word pacify literally means to cover or atone. Jacob is going to atone with his gifts. And it says actually he's going to cover his face. There's this word face. And then again, he will receive me is literally his face. Or when I see him, it's about his face. And there's this kind of all this language about face. So if Jonathan was going to translate this in a very unauthorized translation, it would look like this. I will cover his face with these gifts that go before my face, and afterward, when I look upon his face, perhaps he will lift up my face. This is why I'm not allowed to translate. It'd be a bit awkward, wouldn't it? But if you were reading it in Hebrew, a certain word would stand out to you, wouldn't it? Like the writer is trying to draw our attention to this word face. Like Jacob's going to atone when he stands before his face. Like, And tonight, Jacob, you'll stand in the river in the darkness, in your deepest fear, and you will wrestle the one you have wrestled so long. This word panim, face to face. And he will wound you, but you will get a new name. That's part 2 coming. In conclusion, when your deep fears surface, it's time for deep transformation. A lot of numbers in the story. 2 is one of the numbers. 2 camps, Mahanaim. And in these stories, people never seem to have control of God, like they're just making him do what they want. 2 camps is the invitation to wake up to what God is doing. 400. The number 400 men. Esau's coming with 400 men. Oh, it's our deep fear. It is our deep fear. Maybe today is the day you look into the deep down and you name it. What are you most afraid of? What's down there driving the car? What's that fear that's inside? And the number one prayer. Save me, I'm afraid, but you have said. In the end, this is a coming to him. And it's a good prayer format: invocation, confession, and petition. And hopefully the recognition that your many gifts will not atone for you when you stand before him face to face, but only Jesus. Would you pray with me? Oh, Lord, I love these stories, and I also really don't love these stories. I really did want a hero who just would always be heroic. And I'm left with Jacob, who's very human and very much like me, like us. And I'm grateful for this story of the wrestle of a person's life to learning how to trust in the fear, in the very real life circumstance that he finds himself in. That after one awesome moment, the next moment he could be afraid again. It feels very true. And Lord, I pray that for us, you would help us to have the courage to take the time and space to go down inside. And with you, trust that in your kindness and gentleness, you'll uncover deep fears that you want to heal, that you want to meet. And would you do that work in us, Lord? We thank you that your salvation is meant to encompass every part. So would you do that? We love you. Amen.